Hey graphic designers, it's Mike again. Today I want to talk a little bit about Grayscale Images and how it's used out there in the graphic design world. And a lot of people don't even pay attention to Grayscale Images. And it's probably one of the more important aspects out there in graphic design. When you go out in the work world, you'll be using Grayscale Images in newsletters, flyers, catalogs, and any other pieces like that. And one of the biggest things that I like using Grayscale Images for is that it actually makes the customer or the person viewing the image actually view it and force them to analyze it just on the visual content. And what I mean by that is if most people are attracted to an image that has color over a grayscale one, well, that's great. But a lot of times when you look at that image, what we see is the color. We see the red splash. We see the blue. We don't actually see the meaning of the image. And if you're in grayscale with no distracting color, it makes the person actually go in and analyze it differently. Now, with that in mind, there's some other things, some other tips that you could use to help bring out those grayscale images. And since you can't use color, one of the things we like to use in Photoshop, a couple of tips, is some of the filters that will help enhance that image. So instead of adding color, maybe you shift the focal point by adding a special effect. Maybe apply a Gaussian blur or a radial blur or something, motion blur. There's so many filters out there for that purpose. But again, that's one option that you can use. Besides adding color. So don't forget that you could use filters for that. Now, another thing as we're working with this, most of the time when you take a picture, you scan it in, you probably have actually scan it in color. Take, for example, I have this gumball image that's up on my screen. I scanned it in or I took a digital camera, doesn't matter. What we want to do is we want to get it into grayscale mode. Now most people, what they'll do is they'll go in and change the color mode of the image to grayscale, and that can be found up under Image Mode, Grayscale. Color mode basically is telling you that the image is made up of certain colors or certain values of those colors, and that actually is controlled by what we call the color depth. And the more information about the color depth can be found in your notes in the threaded discussion for week 2. In this case, if I go to grayscale mode, it'll ask me to discard my color information, and I'll click OK. Notice that the color is gone. Well, a lot of times, this is your quick and easy way of doing it. This is not the correct way of doing it. I'm going to undo this. And most books will tell you that you want to convert if you're going to convert a colored image to grayscale, you need to convert it via what we call the lab mode. So if you want to go in and make the best grayscale image possible, and you want, basically if you think about it, we want to work with the brightness, the lightness, and the darkness areas, and leave the color part of the image out of this. Then here's what we need to do is we convert it to what we call the lab mode. And what the lab mode means is L stands for luminosity, A stands for the chromatic range from red to green, and B stands for blue to yellow. And what we're doing is we're taking the brightness and contrast, and we're actually taking it out of the image and putting it on a separate channel. Now if you remember what channels are, we're going to talk about it in a couple weeks, but channels are basically holds your color information. And in this case, by going to lab, it contains the color but also the luminosity of the image, which happens to be basically your brightness and your contrast in the image. So what we want to do is we want to convert it to lab mode first by going up to image mode and do lab color. Now you won't see anything different here, And what I do, I'm going to look over here in my channels palette. You will notice that I have 3 channels now, one for lightness, one for A, one for B. Now if I click on the B, the A, again remember those stand for chromatic range of colors. And then what it did was it brought out the lightness in the image and put it on its own channel, as we call it, the luminosity. So what basically it's going to do, once we convert it to grayscale, it's actually going to take this lightness channel, and that's what it's going to use to convert over to grayscale. So I'll go back up to image mode, I'll click on grayscale. It's going to ask me to discard my color. Now I did the proper way of converting over to the grayscale image by going in and using the lab mode. Now again, very simple technique, but it's a technique that people don't pay attention to. What we're trying to do is bring out more of the brightness, more of the contrast, and one way to do that is to convert it to the lab and go to grayscale. If you have any questions, check out week's 2 discussion thread, and I will talk to you later.